When I was in high school, Wheaton North High School, class of '09, my friends and I would always go to Wendy's. For whatever reason, Wendy's was our spot. It was close to the high school. We could walk there from our high school if we had like a half day of school, but it was easy for us to get to. And honestly, it was cheap. And we were poor high school students, and so we needed the cheap food. And I don't know if it was just me because I was cheap, but it felt like everything was a dollar. Maybe because that was the only things that I had the eyes for because I was cheap. But you could go dollar chicken nuggets, dollar. I think it was double cheeseburger, dollar small fry, dollar chicken sandwich, dollar small frosty. Felt like everything was a dollar. So you'd go, you'd spend $5, and it felt like you were eating like a king. You could get two things of nuggets, a burger, a thing of fries, and a frosty, $5. It was living. But and I don't know if you guys are like this. It was definitely like this for my group of friends. And sometimes it was me, sometimes it's probably you, sometimes it's other people. But there's always that guy or that girl where you show up and they forget the wallet. It's like, oh shoot, I forgot it at home. Oldest trick in the book, right? And so you end up spotting them, or they end up spotting you, because we've all been there, right? If we're honest, we've all been there. And you're always like, oh no, I'll hit you back, and they're like, don't worry about it. And when people say, "Hey, I got you. I got you covered. No need to pay me back. I got your tab today." That feels really good, right? Like that feels like, wow, that's a true friend. And this idea of people not wanting to be paid back is really nice, right? It's really heartwarming. It's really encouraging. It's really fun when people are willing to cover us for things, and or people are willing to pay our bill and not expect us to pay them back, right? It's really nice, but it's really easy to talk about payback and people paying us back, or us paying other people back, when we're talking about chicken nuggets, when we're talking about Wendy's or fast food. But other times it's a bit more complicated, if we're honest, right? Because outside of paying money back to someone we might owe, this idea of payback can come up when someone hurts us. When someone talks about us behind our back. And I think if we're honest, sometimes we really want payback. I think when someone might be flirting with our boyfriend or girlfriend, I think if we're honest, we might want payback. When someone forgets to text us to invite us to the party, or if our group of friends are going out and they don't include us, I think there's times where we might want to get even. We might want payback. We might want to get revenge. And in those moments when we've been hurt, we want payback. And we might not go all weird, scary movie, calling them with a block number, threatening them, or writing them some weird note in the mail with cut up letters from magazines, threatening them about things. It might not be super weird like that. We might not write a song about them like Taylor Swift does about all of her exes. Wouldn't want to be one of those people, but we might want payback in one way or another. We might want them to feel the pain that we felt. We might want them to feel the hurt or the embarrassment that we felt. And I think if we're honest, and honestly, sometimes I'm not any different. Our first reaction to being hurt is almost always to get even. Like we want to get something in return. We don't want our pain to be for nothing. We want other people to feel the pain and the shame and the embarrassment and the woundedness that we feel. And I think that might be true the closer we are to people. I think it might be true that the closer we are to a person, the more we actually want payback, which is kind of weird. But if we think about it, we're not really trying to get payback. We're not trying to get even with other people's siblings, right? It's only our own siblings, the people we're closest to. Our feelings probably aren't hurt because of someone else's best friend, right? It's because of our best friend, our group of friends. You probably aren't angry because of what someone else's ex did. It's obviously what your ex did. It's the people that we're closest to that give us that sometimes cause us the most pain, and that's what gives us the most desire for payback, to get even. And I think for a lot of us, payback can come in one of three ways. One can be public. We want we talk bad about the people that have wronged us. We clap back at them. We argue with them publicly. We bring up something embarrassing about them to make them feel bad, and we do it in a way that's public. Maybe it's in a group of people. Maybe we post on social media something embarrassing about someone. Sometimes it's a little bit more passive. It's a little bit more subtle. We might make comments that aren't totally hurtful, but they could be interpreted in that way. Or we might post something on social media that's subtle. Maybe we subtweet somebody, or we post something on Snapchat that doesn't have the person's picture or name in it, but we want them to know, we want the people closest to them know that this is about them. And the third thing, and maybe it sounds weird, is sometimes it's imaginary payback. Sometimes it's us just envisioning getting revenge, and it's allowing the hate and the anger and the frustration to just boil up inside of us as we think about the ways to possibly get even. And that's equally as unhealthy as the other things, even though it's not quite as public. And I think sometimes the most satisfying form of payback, of getting even, is honestly watching people fall. If we're honest, we've all had probably unhealthy desire and unhealthy joy in seeing people that have hurt us fail. Maybe our ex broke up with somebody for someone else, and then they get broken up with, and we kind of find secret enjoyment in that. Maybe our mom or dad or brother or sister snap at us and hurt our feelings, and now they're crying or they're frustrated and they're apologizing, and it's a perfect setup for us to to kind of clap back at them. Maybe the person that made fun of us or talked bad about us in some way gets publicly humiliated in some way. Maybe they miss an open shot in some sort of, maybe they play on the soccer team and they miss an open shot, or they play on the football team and they make a huge mistake, and there's tons of people there to watch them fail. And in those moments, it feels like justice, right? It feels like someone who inflicted pain on me now has experienced what I felt. All is right in the world again. And that's exactly the sort of situation Joseph found himself in as we wrap up the story of Joseph. Hopefully you've been tuning in these last few weeks, but we've been talking about this guy named Joseph. Now, Jesus' dad's name is Joseph. That's not the Joseph we're talking about. We're talking about this guy named Joseph, whose story is found in the very beginning part of the Bible. The Bible is one story, one congruent story, broken up into different parts, and Joseph's story is found in one of the first parts. It's in the first book of the Bible called Genesis, and his story is wild. And so I'll recap if you're just tuning in for the first time this week. But Joseph was his dad's favorite, and he rubbed it in. Everybody knew it. Joseph knew it. The brothers knew it. And Joseph kind of rubbed it into his brothers' faces. His dad made him, this really extravagant coat that Joseph wore. And to make matters worse, Joseph had these dreams that involved his brothers bowing down to him. Now, that's interesting to have dreams like that and to be able to interpret dreams like that. But because Joseph didn't seem to have the highest level of self-awareness, he told his brothers about these dreams, which obviously didn't win him any family popularity contests. And since Joseph had annoyed his brothers plotted to kill him. Now, I know, even though Joseph's self-awareness wasn't super high and he was pretty frustrating, killing him seemed a little like an overreaction. But instead, what they did was they saw this group of travelers and they said, you know what, we won't kill Joseph, we'll sell him, we'll make some money, but we're going to tell our dad he's dead. And so that's what happened. They sold Joseph as a slave into Egypt, and Joseph was sold into Egypt, but Joseph's dad thought he was dead. Now Joseph was put in charge of all of Egypt, second in command to Pharaoh. Not a bad outcome for someone who was sold into slavery. But a couple of weeks ago, we learned about a plot twist. He put in charge of this guy named Potiphar, not Pharaoh. I should have said Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife tries to hit on Joseph. Joseph says, no, thank you. Potiphar's wife accuses him of raping her, even though Joseph didn't. Joseph gets thrown in jail. He interprets a couple other people's dreams. He gets released from jail, ends up in second in command to Pharaoh. A real riches to rags to riches story. And there's another plot twist that we're going to talk about this week, and that is this. Joseph's family, when Joseph was in Egypt, was living in a place where there was severe famine. There was a real food shortage. And so Joseph's father, whose name was Jacob, sent Joseph's brothers to Egypt to ask for food because their country was out and they were starving. And so at this point of the story, Joseph's family They don't know anything about Joseph. They don't know that he's second in command to Pharaoh. They kind of just assume he's dead. We sold him into slavery. He's probably dead at this point. Years had passed. And they weren't even thinking about the possibility of seeing Joseph when they went to look for food in Egypt. And so they arrive to Egypt and they see Joseph, but they don't recognize him. And so you can read some of these interactions starting in Genesis 42, but we're going to pick up in Genesis 45. Here's what it says, Genesis 45, verse 1. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Imagine the tension of this moment. Joseph is face to face with people who tried to kill him, his own brothers who chose slavery over murder. And they're now seeking him for help, not even recognizing the person standing before them was the very person they sold into slavery. And it's in this moment, after a lot of conversation with them, that Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers. Now, this is the perfect get even moment, if there ever was one. The plot is set for him to get even. Right? It's a perfect opportunity for payback. Joseph could have refused them food. He could have sent them home empty-handed. He could have thrown them in prison. He could have given them a taste of their own medicine. He could have done any number of things to get payback. He could have done any number of things to inflict the pain and the frustration and the woundedness and the embarrassment on his brothers that they had inflicted on him. I'm not sure what I would have done. I would ask you the same question. What would you do in this situation if you were Joseph? I mean, you don't have to say it out loud, but in your head, be honest with yourself. What would you have done if you had all the power? If you were second in command of a whole country and your family members who literally sold you into slavery came begging for help? What would you have done in that moment? I'm a little bit aware of my own sinfulness, of my own garbage, of my own mess. I don't think I would have responded super graciously. But here's what Joseph says next. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." There's only one reason Joseph could have responded the way he did. He didn't try to get payback. He had already let go of the idea of revenge. He'd already done the hard work of forgiveness. And we know that because he can look into the eyes of those who have caused him the most possible amounts of pain, and he cares about how they're feeling. He says, "Don't be distressed. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here." Can you imagine saying to somebody who sold you, "Don't be angry with yourself for doing that"? He was acknowledging what they did was wrong, and he was acknowledging his hurt without creating more hurt. And only someone who had truly forgiven someone, I think, can do this. Here's what Joseph did. In this moment, he's choosing forgiveness over payback. He's choosing forgiveness over payback. In this moment, in this perfect opportunity for revenge, the stage is set for him to get even. He chose forgiveness over payback. Somewhere between being sold into slavery and being reunited with his brothers, Joseph did the hard work of healing. And so that's why God was quick to acknowledge that it was God who wanted Joseph in Egypt. Because Joseph, being in Egypt, helped save people's lives. And so this is what I want us to encourage. That's what I want to encourage us in this week is that when we don't know what to do, and there's going to be many situations in the relationships that we have with people, whether it's friends or family members, when we don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. Because when we pursue peace, we fight for the relationship. When we pursue peace, we fight for reconciliation. When we pursue peace, we fight for forgiveness. And when we pursue peace, we say that the relationship is more important than being right. Love is more important than getting even. Forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. So pursue peace and fight for the relationship. And when you pursue peace, you lay down your right to get even. You lay down your right to get payback. You lay down your right for revenge. You say goodbye to your desire to get even, and we choose the path of forgiveness. When you don't know what to do, just like Joseph did, pursue peace instead of payback. And it can be complicated because what happens to you isn't exactly what happens to Joseph. I know a lot of us have painful things that have happened to us. We have very real hurts and very real wounds. We have toxic friendships and we have things to navigate. And so I want to encourage us this week in small group. Think about what it means to pursue peace. What do we need to decide? Who do we need to forgive? What offense do we need to bring to God? Who do we need to pray to God to help us forgive? Because God can do incredible things in our story, in our hearts, in our lives. He can change the way we feel about people. He can turn our wounds into desires for peace. And so I want to encourage us, hey, have something in mind this week when you talk with your small group. Share a story about someone who's hurt you and how you can forgive that person. And so my encouragement for us this week is this: when we don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback.